Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Mansplained podcast. Today is November 25th, Thanksgiving Eve. My name is Jacob and I'm joined with...
Hi, Mark.
And today we'll be talking about Thanksgiving. Lately it's been under attack by activists who thought we mistreated the Indians, and we're here to give you the true history of Thanksgiving.
That's right. And first, I'd like to wish all of you a happy Thanksgiving and go out there and celebrate it with your family. Don't let any government entity tell you who you can and can't celebrate with, when, or with how many people. You have the First Amendment right to assemble, and they can't stop that. Don't give them the power because they'll never give it back.
And for the families with 7 people in their household, I'm sorry that you have to make a tough decision this week.
Yep, sorry, Jimmy. You can't come to the table.
But back to Thanksgiving, we're going to tell you the true history, how we've discovered it, how we learned it. You know, back in the 1600s, the Pilgrims, as we know, were fleeing England for their religious liberty.
Yep. In 1608, they decided, you know what, we've had enough of this Church of England business. We have a different view on religion, and we feel that we should be allowed to celebrate Christ in our own way. So they packed up and they moved to Holland. At the time, Holland was the only country in Europe with the ability to have religious freedom of any sort. So they went there and they stayed there for, I want to say, 12 years. And they decided, enough of Holland. We don't want to raise Dutch children. We want to raise English children, but with our religious values. So they found a bunch of venture capitalists, a company called the Virginia Company, and they came to an agreement that the Virginia Company would fund a colony in the New World, and the Pilgrims would be the colonizers. So they boarded a little ship about 50 feet long, set off across the Atlantic, and arrived in the New World in November of 1620.
That ship was called the Mayflower. I'm sure that you guys know that. But like you said, this was a short ship with 102 passengers. The captain's name was Christopher Jones. And when they arrived in Plymouth, they had an economy that we would recognize as socialism today. But back then, they didn't have that terminology. And it really didn't work out for the Pilgrims.
Right. After the first winter, more than 50% of the group had died over the winter.
The winter was so bad that they couldn't even, start building anything on land. They had to live in the Mayflower that whole winter.
So during the first winter, the first governor of Plymouth, where they landed, had died, and William Bradford became the new governor. And so they set off the ship, and they started working and building, and, yes, they worked with the Indians. The Indians helped them learn out where the beavers were and how to use the new natural resources that they'd never seen before to their benefit. And during the socialist experiment that they had called the Mayflower Compact, where the Virginia Company owned everything, the Pilgrims did all the work, but there was no private ownership. And all of the fruits of the hunting and the farming and the building and everything all went into a quote-unquote central bank where all the Pilgrims could draw from, and all the Pilgrims were forced to put the fruits of their labor into. And as you would expect, that worked out about as good as it could, because some people said, you know what, I don't need to work this hard because John is going to pick up the slack. And you all know you've experienced this in a school project where you work in a group, or at work where you're part of a team. And there's always people who work hard, and there's always people who work as little as possible.
Yeah, there's a issue there called collective action, where everyone wants to be bound to a common goal and work their hardest, but we know in reality that just doesn't happen. Like he said, in a school project, there are these people called free riders, who don't really care about the outcome of their grade. You could have someone in the class or in your group that wants that A, and they'll work their butt off for it. But then you'll have your free rider who doesn't really care about an A, doesn't really care about a B. He just wants the passing grade. So he'll work as little as possible, knowing that that overachiever who wants the A is going to pick up that slack. And even if they fall short of that A, the free rider is still loving that B he got.
Right. He's good because you did all the extra work and he did hardly anything.
He expected little and got more than he expected by working as little as possible.
So in about 1622, William Bradford said, "This isn't working." So he got rid of the central bank, and he said, every head of the household gets X amount of land to do with as he pleases. It's his land. So he introduced private property rights into the communal nature that to start it out with. So no more did the man who did little get the same as the man who did all. You were now responsible for your own grain, your own water, your own meat, or you could barter whatever you produced with somebody else. So when that happened, the Pilgrim colony started to flourish. And because everybody had to put in and be successful in order to survive. So no longer could you ride on the coattails of your neighbor.
Yeah, and this is kind of what we've seen in any socialist country, right? Where it sounds good on paper, everyone working their hardest, everyone working for the same common goal. But then in practice, you can't help human nature and those free riders, and it just brings the whole thing down. And that's why we know that capitalism or private ownership brings out the best working people, because without their best work, they get nothing.
Right. So after they had started having success, they wanted to have a Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving was a time after harvest where they planned to have a great feast for everybody. And they had so much bounty, they invited the Indians to share in the bounty. They were thankful for the Indians' help when they arrived, but the purpose of the feast was not to thank the Indians. The purpose of the feast and the gathering, because remember, they were Christians, and one of the main tenets of Christianity is to preach the gospel. So they brought the Indians in for a meal, and the purpose of the meal was to thank God for the bounty which they had received in the New World. And there was no taking advantage of anybody. I'm sure we all understand the Indians helped and the Pilgrims took it, but the Indians also gained from the help. It wasn't like the Pilgrims came and kidnapped the tribe of Indians and forced them to teach them how to hunt or use beaver pelts or anything like that. It was a mutually beneficial relationship, or both parties wouldn't have engaged in it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That we all know that the Indians helped, but it's not like we took their stuff by force to survive through that winter. We gladly accepted the help, and we scrapped and clawed our way through the first winter. And when spring came around, the Indians taught us how to hunt in the new lands. They taught us how to farm the new vegetables that we didn't have over in England. And taking that knowledge along with our new economic plan of private ownership, things just started to boom. They flourished. They were all healthy, and like he said, the first Thanksgiving, it was a 3-day long harvest of just a celebration of how good they finally had it here.
Yes, and we're not discounting the impact that the native people had at all. We want to make the point that Thanksgiving wasn't meant to celebrate the help that the Indians gave to the early settlers. And one of the Indians who was most influential in helping the new colony was an Indian named Squanto. And Squanto had at one point in time either been captured or kidnapped from the English and brought to England, where he learned how to speak English, and eventually he came back to America. And he was instrumental in helping the Pilgrims because they shared a common faith and a common goal at this point in time. So he was able to negotiate with maybe the not so friendly Indians or the friendly Indians in order to have some sort of peace and prosperity for everybody.
Right. The Indians, they wanted to help. We needed the help, and we both benefited, like he said. The celebration, we didn't take advantage of the Indians. The Indians didn't take advantage of us. It was mutual, and without their help, we wouldn't have made it.
And I think today, so many years later, there's a lot of people who conflate what the Pilgrims and the Indians relationship was like with maybe what the Western expansion and some of those Indian tribes relationship was like. Certainly, at points in time, the Americans were not fair to the natives. That's indisputable. But you have to separate that from what really happened when the Pilgrims came, which was a long time before Western expansion and a long time before a lot of the bad blood on both sides happened.
Right. So to wrap up the history lesson, the failed communism and the failed socialism of the Pilgrims is what made the first winter so harsh, and even the following spring, and the teachings from the Indians along with the new plan of private ownership is what helped the Pilgrims flourish.
Right. And the biggest takeaway is because of their new private ownership model, they had so much bounty, they had an excess of food, and they invited their native friends over for a great feast to celebrate God and the blessings that he had bestowed upon them. That's what the Thanksgiving was really about.
It was a celebration, see how far they've gotten, that they're finally successful, and that they're over successful, that they could even have this 3-day celebration. And now today we know that Thanksgiving, along with Christmas, along with all these religious-backed holidays, are kind of being under attack.
Yeah, and any religious holiday, it seems, Christian religion, because nobody cares about Muslim religion holidays and nobody cares about Jewish religious holidays, really. But for some reason, Christianity and its holidays are under attack by the left-leaning among us. And the only reason I can think of that is in socialism, you can have no God. If you have a God, you have hope. And if you have hope, the government can't save you. There's another way out. And I think that's why today, in 2020, with Corona, the government is pushing everyone to see how far they can go. The conspiracy tinfoil hat time, this is like a test. How far can we push the people before they push back? So don't let any government official, any health inspector ruin your Thanksgiving. You celebrate Thanksgiving the way you want to, with the people who want to celebrate it with you. That's what's important.
Think about how hard those Pilgrims fought. They took a 2-month expedition across the Atlantic on a wooden ship, that was packed with people in the middle of storm season in November. And if you know anything about, boating in November, the gales are strong and deadly. And, they fought tooth and nail to make it in the New World. And we need to do the same to hold our traditions to a high standard and to not allow anyone to take those away from us.
Right. We all know the dangers surrounding the coronavirus. We all know what the survivability of the coronavirus is. If you're over 70 years old, it's 95%. If you're under 70 years old, it's a ghastly 99.5% survivability rate. There's a lot of fear-mongering out there. There's a lot of oh my godding. We all can take the information in and make our own decisions. That's free will. So celebrate that and celebrate with your families if you choose to. But don't let anybody dictate who you can spend your time with on a holiday.
It's kind of like what he was saying a bit earlier about it's a test to see how far they can push us. If they can take away Thanksgiving, then they're going to take that and push towards, Easter. And if we let them take Easter, then they'll take Christmas. You if you give an inch, they'll take a mile. And if we want, to hold our First Amendment of religious liberty, we can't, let anybody, government or just an individual, take those rights away from us. Our celebrations, God above all. These celebrations, Christmas isn't about presents, Thanksgiving isn't about food, and Easter isn't about rabbits. It's all about God and our celebration, our devotion to Him.
And if you're not religious, that's fine. If you're an atheist, that's also fine. Because another thing they're taking away is freedom to assemble, which is also covered by the First Amendment to the Constitution. And remember, the Constitution limits government. It is not a granting of rights to you. So if they tell you can't have a Thanksgiving, or you can't have a Christmas, or a Rosh Hashanah, or an Easter, or a Yom Kippur, or a Kwanzaa celebration, they're taking away your right to assemble. And that is a protected right that the government cannot infringe on and interfere with.
And if they can take, the Christian celebrations away, why can't you be next? Taking of rights is a slippery slope. You might agree with this one taking away the rights of this person, even though, you probably shouldn't. But if you allow their rights to be taken away, who's on the chopping block next? It's gonna be you.
That's right. And we hate to make Thanksgiving political, but in these times it seems everything is political.
Right. And he mentioned atheism, and you can celebrate these holidays and not have a religious domination, but you still hold values that we would hold as Christians or Jewish people or anything. We believe in just being good people, loving your neighbor, doing what's best for others. You don't have to believe in God to believe in the golden rule, treat others as you would yourself. And, these holidays are a celebration of those teachings and those believings.
And it's a great time to spend with your family and your friends, because in this world, the only thing that really matters is your family and your friends. Because you can have all the money and all the houses, but if you don't have anybody to share it with, do you have any joy? I don't think I would.
Right. So now we've discussed the history, the true story of Thanksgiving. We've discussed why it's under attack and why we should fight against that. And I have a question for you, and I want to ask you, why is Thanksgiving important to you?
Oh, Thanksgiving is important to me for the reasons that we laid out. It's a celebration of faith. It's a celebration of the bounty that, as a family, we've accrued throughout the year. But it's also a time to reflect and to look back on the year, and for me, my whole life. And I can think of the good things, the good people, the good memories, the obstacles that we've overcome as a family, that I've overcome personally. But for just one example, my grandfather, who was one of the most important people in my life, his favorite holiday was Thanksgiving. And he was a simple man, and he wasn't a very emotional man. But you could always tell that on Thanksgiving he was a happy man. And he was joyful all day, loved the meal, loved having the family together. And that is probably what makes Thanksgiving my favorite holiday of the year. And he's been gone now on 20 years, but not a Thanksgiving goes by that I don't picture him sitting next to me and ending the night with a good game of euchre.
For those of you who don't know what that is, it's a card game. Look it up. It's very, very fun.
It's the card game.
The card game.
What about you? What makes Thanksgiving special for you?
I think it kind of touches on what you said and about the origins of Thanksgiving. It's a celebration. It's looking back at all the trials and tribulations that we've had and in your life and your family's life. And it's like a sigh of relief of, oh, we've made it this far and we can keep going. And it's like this kind of holiday season is all about that. Like a sigh of relief that we've made it this far. All the pain, the trials, the tribulations are all worth it because now we're all here together around the table. on the Zoom call if you want to celebrate virtually. And it's just taking account for all that you've gained, not materialistically, but more spiritually, with your family, with your friends, and just taking those bonds, holding them close, and celebrating them.
And you can see hope on the horizon for another good year to be thankful for.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to wish all the viewers a very happy Thanksgiving. And you don't have to celebrate it our way. You don't have to agree with anything we said. That's perfectly fine. But we wish the best to you and your family. And we're thankful to have you watching this podcast, The Two Guys in Their Garage. And, tell your friends about all the great stuff that we talk about.
Mm-hmm. Even if you disagree with what we say, I hope there's some value in there that you can not necessarily take to heart, but just to get you thinking.
Right. We're not trying to change your mind, and we're not trying to proselytize. This is just another point of view, whether you agree with it, agree with some of it, or disagree with all of it. It's just another point of view to put in your toolbox so that when you ponder things, it's just a different lens to look through. And really that's all that we can hope for as people, that when we look at something, it's not just through the binoculars of our own prism, because other people have good ideas that at least deserve to be entertained. And we should all be thankful for free will.
Right. I just did a school project about this podcast, actually. And in that, I discovered that we kind of have a unique take on things as being a father and son duo with, being a middle-class, blue-collar family. We just hope that we can offer you that new perspective that you wouldn't get through the mainstream media on either side. They're all living in gated communities, and, they can survive a bad year. And I just hope that this gives you a new perspective, like you said.
Yep. Middle America, not on either coast. And where kitchen table issues still matter to our family, and they probably matter to your family, but our opinion makers in big tech and on the news, it doesn't matter to them whether or not you work today or never work again, because they get paid the same regardless. I don't know. We're getting too off in the weeds, and sorry we had to make Thanksgiving somewhat political, but that's the only way to explain the communal versus the private property rights that happened in the beginning. So,
yep.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Christmas is coming up. Don't let them stop you from celebrating that either.
Yep. Again, thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed. Happy Thanksgiving, and stay tuned for the Christmas episode.
And Thanksgiving meal is really about the dressing.